Have you ever asked yourself, how is it that food and nutrition and a healthy diet has become such a minefield? And if you have, would it be useful to have some tools and strategies and shortcuts to understand exactly what it is that you need to do to optimize your chances of taking home a healthy baby through a healthy diet? I hope so, and that's exactly what we're here to do today. And what I want to achieve with you in just under 60 minutes is to give you all the step-by-step instructions that I give my patients in my clinic so that you can too implement everything that you need to know to eat your way to parenthood. Welcome, welcome. I'm Gabriela Rosa. I'm a fertility specialist. I'm also a Harvard University awarded scholar, and for the last 2 decades I have helped couples overcome infertility and miscarriage even when other treatments have failed. And now we've had over 136,000 people complete or register for some of our programs, and over the years I have learned many things that I think can be useful in this conversation, because diet and nutrition, it has become so complicated over the years. My God, from every diet under the sun, from when to eat to what to eat, there's a lot of confusion. And so today I want to make sure that we get some clarity around what's actually going to get you closer to your outcome of taking home a healthy baby and take the stress out of it in terms of what it is that you need to do. So I hope you are as excited as I am for this session, because it's one that comes up over and over and over again. And of course, as always, I would love to be able to answer your questions and go through and interact about this topic if there's anything that you want to know in terms of this, and I'll go through in a moment some more of the questions that I'll be answering today. But if you have questions and you want to know specifically what it is that you need to do in terms of nutrition, go ahead and put it in the chat. Either on the comments on Facebook or on Instagram, go ahead and put it in, and I'll do my very best to be able, to answer them as we go along today. So I want to acknowledge you, because making changes is never an exactly straightforward or easy thing. Not so much because of the change or the practicality of making that change alone, but because often, especially when it comes to nourishing and nutrition, and I don't really like the word diet, but we're going to use it in this context anyway. There is a lot that is involved in terms of the emotional component that stops us from making the best choices, or the best possible choices for us that we could be making. So I want to acknowledge you for showing up, for educating yourself, for helping yourself understand more about what it is that you can do in order to optimize your chances of taking home a healthy baby. And that is where we're going to get started. Now, I'm also going to make sure, so if you are listening in live, make sure that you say hello, let me know where in the world you're watching from. I always like to know that. I have to say, today in Sydney, if you have been living under a rock for the last couple of months, you will know that Australia is burning. It's on fire. In Sydney, we have been affected to a very large degree, mostly by the smoke and all of the aftermath of all of these bushfires. And today, finally, the first time in all of this, there's been some sprinkles here and there, but today it's proper raining. So we are very excited, as much as there's no sunshine. So I needed a little bit of sunshine on my face today, hence the lipstick. So I thought, it would be nice to kind of just be a little bit nicer than what it is outside today. So very well. Some of you are saying hello. Oh, hello. Oh, gorgeous Erica, I love you. It is fun to connect with me live. It's fun to connect with you live. So there you go. I see Rachel here too. So welcome, welcome. And so let's just go through. And I think that the biggest thing here. Hello, big eyes. Oh my God, I love you guys. I love it when you say hello. I love it. I really do. So in terms of what else, I think that I've mentioned the practicalities of diet, nutrition and nourishment. The reality is that it's not as hard as we kind of make it out to be. And I think that sometimes media makes it hard, because there's like this new diet that's supposed to fix every problem under the sun every 5 seconds, right? There's something new somewhere around the world. And so it becomes really quite challenging to know, okay, what's true, what's not true, and what should I do about all of this information that I have? And sometimes, unfortunately, it becomes misinformation. And what also happens is that diet and nutrition, there are different contexts to it, and there are different populations that respond in different ways. And here's what I mean. You can go onto the scientific literature and the research, and you will find all sorts of things from, you should eat a Mediterranean diet to you should be vegan or vegetarian or, and I mean, obviously there's a lot of empirical evidence too, which is basically people figure out what works for them and then want to make that the thing that works for everyone, right? So there's a whole lot of that. And so what ends up happening is it becomes very complicated without it needing to be so. The one thing that I think is important that we acknowledge and understand here, and there's been some big institutions, Harvard being one of them, that's published the Harvard fertility diet, for example, right? The key aspect here is that there are different populations that these observational studies are based upon. And so if we are talking about a population of healthy people, which is essentially, the Harvard diet has come out of the nurses' health study, which typically is a population of nurses who are in typically good health, right? They didn't specifically ask in that study whether they were trying to conceive or not. They just looked at the retrospective data. They looked at it retrospectively and analysed it and came up with some suggestions in terms of, how those people were eating and their reproductive outcomes, despite the fact that they may not have been trying to conceive and or have experienced fertility problems when they completed the survey and provided their results. So what am I trying to say here? The population that I work with is very much, a population of people who have tried lots of different things and nothing has worked, right? Typically, people who come to me, they either have been infertile or experienced miscarriages and have been trying to take home a healthy baby for more than 2 years, have known obstacles to optimum fertility, and as I said before, typically have tried lots of different things that haven't worked. For the 20 years that I have been doing this work, from the perspective of where I sit, I'm looking at my patients and figuring out, okay, from really almost kind of putting my science hat on, looking at my patients and figuring out what works for the majority of them, and then taking some of the science of what's actually available in terms of what's going to be beneficial for couples who are trying to conceive and correlating that and then doing a little bit of trial and error. Right? And it is, ultimately, in terms of nutrition and the proper nutrition that we should be putting into our bodies, sometimes it is a little bit of trial and error. Think about it. What your friend eats versus what your sister eats or your brother or your mother or your father, each one of us responds in a different way. Our bodies respond in a different way. Some people are more sensitive to a certain food component. Other people are more sensitive to other foods. And so what happens is we need to become our own scientists to a certain extent. And we need to perform what's called an N of 1 trial, right? Which is basically where you look at yourself, what it is that you have been doing, then you put an intervention in place, then you measure yourself again. And that really is what I recommend when it comes to a healthy fertility diet, with some of the suggestions and recommendations that I'm going to be making today, because ultimately I've already not only done the N of 1 trial, I've done the many of 1 trials with my own patients, right? And looking at the responses and the results that we've had from the types of recommendations that we give. So the recommendations that I give and that I'm going to be sharing with you here today in terms of an optimum fertility diet, it has come from the 20 years of experience, as well as, of course, my clinical practice and my clinical experience, and of course the research. And it's almost a blend of those things together. But still, irrespective of that, you still need to actually check in with your body as you're going through and implementing these things and figuring out, how does my body respond to this? I'm going to be making it super simple and super straightforward. And really your job is to implement some of these guidelines, because I don't believe in giving you a diet to follow, right? I think I very much believe in education and making sure that you've got the tools and the strategies that you need to make some good decisions in your on your own, and certainly for yourself, right? And so in order for us to be able to do that, I'm going to give you some guidelines. And then what I would like for you to do is actually put those guidelines to the test in your particular situation and see how your body responds. And then you've got to do that for a good period of time. Right, because changes in the body, like literally every 4 months, every single one of your red blood cells is brand new. Believe it or not, every single hemoglobin in your body 4 months ago is no longer in your body today. Right, and this is what's happening all the time. Our body is making and remaking itself as we go along, and it does that by using and utilizing all of these building blocks that we have in the form of food. So if you're putting in, it's the same old story, garbage in, garbage out. And so when we look at fertility, when we look at optimizing reproductive function, we really need to look at what are the building blocks that we're putting into the body. Are they quality? Because if they're not quality, that is going to impact female reproduction, male reproduction, and most importantly, the health of a developing embryo, which may in fact result in a poor reproductive outcome or a successful one. So all of these things, all of these factors do play a role, and it's important that we understand it from that context, as well as understanding that we are first and foremost, in order to optimize fertility, optimizing health, right? That is the key. Is this making sense? Give me some love, give me some likes. I love the people who have said hello. Hello, Chantel, Claudia, Zoe, Kaylee. Lovely to see you guys. I know that there's lots of people on Instagram as well who have said hello. So mwah, big love to you guys. But, you know, let me know, because I think that it's important for us to understand context. And if we understand context, then we can layer upon that things that are actually going to be helpful. Great. So Instagram is giving me thumbs up. I love it. And, you know, this is going to be key as well, because often we think that in society, there's this kind of undercurrent, you know, that goes on, that fertility is a female issue. The reality is that nothing is further from the truth. Infertility, miscarriage is actually a 50-50 equation. We're looking at male fertility as much as we're looking at female fertility, and it is crucial that we understand it and that we operate and that we work with it in that context, right? Taking all of those pieces into consideration, because otherwise we're only looking at one half of the equation and leaving a whole lot to chance, right? So we want to make sure that we are avoiding that. The practicalities of, you know, an optimum fertility diet actually requires that we take the emotion out of it, because think about it. A lot of the times the choices and the decisions that we make in terms of what we put in our mouths and in terms of what we eat or what we don't eat and how we eat and when we eat is actually very much correlated to who we are with, where we are, and, you know, a whole lot of other contextual things that have nothing to do with optimum nutrition. My mum is the best at this. She says that her taste buds know nothing. She eats what's good for her body, right? I go, I'm not quite that person. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about how we can compromise, you know, on the making sure that we're eating for nourishment, but also having that little bit of a 10% for the soul. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. But some of the very frequently asked questions that I get, let me just read them through to you, because if you have any other questions that are not here, you might want to actually ask on the different platforms, and I'll do my best to answer them. But I'm going to really be focusing on answering all of these major questions that I get all the time. So what does an optimal fertility diet consist of? What foods must I include in my diet to improve my chances of a healthy pregnancy? What foods do I need to avoid? What are the most up-to-date guidelines in terms of caffeine and alcohol for preconceptual health care? How much fruit can I eat? Are there particular foods that improve sperm health, egg quality, and enhance implantation? This is a great question, because wives' tales galore out there on social media, and a lot of people think that, you know, these things are actually for real, like, you know, the whole pineapple thing and pineapple core and this, and, you know, the reality is, I'm sorry to be the bearer of, you know, kind of reality here, but you can eat as many pineapple cores or pineapples as you like. It's not going to have the implantation capability that you are hoping or expecting. Placebo is a wonderful thing, right? And I don't discount the effect of placebo at all. However, no. In terms of it actually having a positive effect, there is no data, no research that will actually do that. So, you know, as always, I recommend a healthy, nourishing, nutritious diet because that's really ultimately what's going to make the hugest difference to the overall outcome that you're trying to achieve. How do dietary recommendations change if I have PCOS? Well, as a woman with PCOS myself, I can tell you that pretty much every single recommendation that I'm going to be giving you here today is going to be the same across the board, whether you have PCOS or not. And in fact, these recommendations work incredibly well if you do have irregular cycles, PCOS, or anything else of that sort. What are the guidelines around healthy weight loss to optimize fertility? This is a really good question I get asked all the time. In fact, I think, yes, I have done a weight loss talk, so you might want to look at that on the Gabriela Rosa Fertility page on Facebook. You will find all of the replays of my previous talks. There's also a catalogue in there, so you can go ahead and have a look. But this is an important thing to address as well. And of course, I'm not going to spend a very long time on it because I've done it before, but it's something that I'll touch upon. How frequently should I be eating? And am I allowed to, I'm following the meal plans, but I'm not satisfied. What do I do? In terms of, like, we have some meal plans on the website just for ideas. You know, sometimes people get really stuck on what does it actually look like, all of these guidelines. And so you actually have access to these meal plans on the website if you wanted to, and it's naturalfertilitybreakthrough.com. In fact, there's 3 things that I'm going to recommend that's going to make this talk a whole lot easier, and I'll talk about that in a moment before we progress. But one last question that I also get asked is, do the recommendations change if I'm pregnant? The answer is no, they do not. So the recommendations are the recommendations from beginning to baby, right? I say to my patients, we hold your hand from beginning to baby, and these recommendations will be the same, right, throughout that entire reproductive window. From beginning to baby. In terms of 3 things that I think might make this talk not only easier, but easier to implement, there's a couple of things that I would recommend. The first one is in my new book, Fertility Breakthrough, which I'm supposed to sign a copy for someone, so I've got a copy here. So in this book, chapters 11 and 12, if I say so myself, I have done a very good job in this book, in particular in terms of how to make changes and how to make changes stick in terms of nutrition and diet. And in those chapters, 11 and 12, and I did it because I know how much of a problem or an issue or a challenge or a concern this is for thousands and thousands of people that I've come across over the years. So in chapters 11 and 12, if you've got the book, and we potty, I've got you, okay? So just know I've got you. We Potty, by the way, for those of you, is going to be doing a giveaway on the books very soon. So that's going to be a fun thing to do. But anyway, so in terms of these chapters, they go through and they really do enable you to absolutely transform what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it. And you know what I find, making change is actually, it happens in the heartbeat, right? It happens in literally the click of a finger. The issue that we all have with making adjustments to diet and environmental factors and lifestyle is the emotional piece. It's the part that keeps us stuck, right? And like I said, yesterday's or last week's talk on creating lasting habit change, it's going to be a great one for you to actually review and have a look at. That's my second point here. If you haven't watched that talk yet, I would highly recommend that you do, because that's going to really make a huge difference in terms of making this process easier, making the process of adjustment easier. Can you see? The pieces that I need to share with you in terms of what constitutes a healthy fertility diet are actually really simple, right? The difficult part, the hard part, so to speak, is actually the getting it done, it's always the getting it done. It's always the getting it done that we get kind of stuck on, right? So the reason that I'm sharing these 3 pieces with you, which, the first is the book, the second is the previous episode on creating lasting habit change, and the third is the Fertility Challenge. Now, the Fertility Challenge is an online event. It's completely free. It's on now. I think today is day 9. And, so you still have time to not only join, but also catch up. If you want to join, it's very simple. Just type on your URL, fertilitychallenge.online/register. That's what it is. fertilitychallenge.online/register. You can go register. You can find the group on Facebook, and you'll be able to join us. And in the Fertility Challenge, this is also a piece that I actually take you through in great detail how to actually implement. Okay, so over and above what I'm going to be talking about today here, you will also be able to actually get the very practical guidance as to what it is that you need to do in terms of diet, nutrition, and of course, specifically diet and nutrition for fertility. Okay, so those are some of the things that I think help us set the scene around what's important here and what it is that we need to do about it. So now that we've got that under our belts, let's go through and talk about the 3 big ideas. So, normally what I like to do in these talks is I like to get all of those questions and synthesize them into 3 big ideas, 3 things that if you were to do those things, it's going to pretty much get, the 20% of the effort that's going to give you 80% of your result. So that's what we're going to do next. The very first big idea is everything. I want to talk about everything you must add to your diet, to your healthy fertility diet. Because often people look at diet in terms of what they're actually removing and what they're actually kind of letting go of and what they're actually going to be deprived of. And that is why, or one of the big reasons as to why it doesn't work, right? Because as humans, guess what? We don't want to feel deprived. We don't want to feel like we're missing out. We don't want to feel like we don't have the things that we want. We want to feel like we're actually doing something good for ourselves and that we're adding to what it is that we're doing. So it's a little bit of a psychological piece that in my opinion, has made a huge difference to my life and obviously to my patients' lives. So everything you need to add to your diet, and here's why. You see, by 8 weeks gestation, a baby's health blueprint is set for the rest of his or her life, right? So a baby's health blueprint becomes the lowest common denominator of both prospective parents' health at the time of conception. So many people have a misconception around optimizing a baby's health. Like the thing that happens all the time is the second a woman becomes pregnant, it's like she goes, oh my God, now I need to eat well, I need to exercise, I need to make sure that I do this, and I avoid this. The reality is this, it takes a good 4 to 8 months to optimize the quality of the egg and the sperm. Right? And if that being the case, by 8 weeks gestation, which it is, it's biology, right? You can go and look at your biology books. By 8 weeks gestation, as a baby has all its little organs, all its little fingerprints, all already kind of set and organized. All it's doing from there is it's growing. So if your building blocks to that developing embryo are junk food, guess what? Are you going to have the ability to change those building blocks and that beginning, embryo that has already progressed in its developmental stages? The reality is no. So the time to optimize a child's health isn't when you're pregnant or when you get a positive pregnancy test. It's actually way before a pregnancy or conception has even become part of you. And this is as a couple, because remember, a conception requires a sperm and an egg. It doesn't just happen, from an egg, even though the development of that embryo is almost directed by the embryo itself and also the maternal kind of, framework that is in place, like the womb and, her entire system. It's absolutely the beginning processes are going to be happening from those originating cells. So if we want to make a difference to not only the ability to take a healthy pregnancy to term and deliver a healthy baby and, of course, have a healthy child, that work needs to start way before a conception is even in place. And so it comes back to what are we adding to the equation that's going to help us achieve just that. Does that make sense? Because, you know, this is a really very key aspect to what actually makes a difference in terms of fertility and in terms of reproductive outcomes. If we don't have this piece right, guess what? We're going to be leaving a whole lot on the table, right, in terms of ability to make a change. Now, what I will recommend is that you get some pen and paper, because from here I'm going to be like shooting at you some very specific things that you need to start looking at, and that I would highly recommend that you start to think about and entertain the possibility of implementing into your day-to-day. So are we ready? Are we ready? Give me some love, give me some likes, let me know if we're ready. And of course, on Instagram, because I love you guys, just let me know if we're good to go. I hope that we are. I think that you guys are a pretty smart lot. There you go. We're getting the okay, the go ahead. So pen and paper. One thing that I will say, if you are after any resources in terms of this, go to the Natural Fertility Breakthrough. So naturalfertilitybreakthrough.com/shop. In there you will find, you know, my book, Eat Your Way to Parenthood, which could be helpful as well. You will find meal plans. You will find a whole lot of resources that are going to help you. You don't need them. You can go and get them through the Fertility Challenge, or you can, you know, do your own research and everything else. But if you wanted to kind of get a shortcut, that would be something that I would recommend over and above this conversation today. So let's talk about all the things that we're going to add, right? What are all the things that we're actually going to do? And we're going to start with a very simple concept. And that's the concept that I've come up with of, you know, eating 1 to 3 steps from field to plate, or from earth to table, right? So what does that mean? Well, basically, when you have and of course, we want to make sure, you know, it's that whole concept of eating all of the colors of the rainbow. So you want your diet, a healthy fertility diet, and in fact, a healthy diet in general, comes from adding as much variety as possible. Very often, people become sensitive or sensitized or allergic to certain things because they're eating those same types of foods all the time. And allergies or sensitivities are kind of, they work on a bit of a threshold. So, you know, you eat the types of things that your body may react to, and you keep it under that threshold, and that's okay. The problem is that often we don't understand our threshold. We don't understand where it's actually going to be a problem. So we start having symptoms above that threshold. So the best way to avoid that is to add as much variety as possible. And that concept of, you know, 1 to 3 steps from field to table, corn is a great example, because, you know, we can see, we can absolutely see a corn cob, right, on your plate. You can see exactly what it looked like in the field on your plate. That is 1 step from field to plate. Once we then take that corn cob after it's cooked and we take the kernels out of it, right, it becomes that's a second step. That's a processing step, and it becomes a second step from field to table. Okay, then let's say that we take that corn cob and we, you know, blend it in a blender and put it through, you know, something else, or make some, you know, for example, let's see, what's a good third step? Yeah, I mean, let's say we blend it, we make it into a puree, cream of corn, right? That's a third step. That is as far as I would like to go. Because yeah, we've got all the corn cobs coming up on Instagram for me. So, you know, that is as far as I would like to see it. Because from there, guess what happens? Let's say we go and eat polenta, right? Polenta is made out of corn. So all of a sudden, we've got a situation here where that corn has not only been harvested, the kernels have been removed, it has been blended and processed, and it's been dried. And then all of a sudden, we have polenta. Right? Then let's say that we have even a fifth step there, which is basically where we've got all of those steps, and then we've made it into something and we've fried it and we call it corn chips, right? That's a fifth step. So you can see that from a third step onwards, we're already not being able to actually recognize what that food looked like when it was in the field. Okay, so that's what we want to actually make sure that we do. We want to add foods to our plate that we literally can recognize, that we can look at it and we can go, yes, this is what that food was. This is what it looked like when it was in the field. This is extremely important because you see, an optimum fertility diet is based mostly on a very natural kind of, a very natural diet based on vegetables and protein, a good quality protein. So, you want to be adding organic always is very important, animal proteins to the mix. There's a whole lot of contention in terms of, veganism, vegetarianism. I'll talk more about that in a moment. I don't particularly recommend a vegan or vegetarian diet. I was a vegetarian for 12 years, and having PCOS, I can honestly say that most vegetarians, unfortunately, eat very poorly. Most vegetarians actually don't eat enough vegetables. They end up eating, and I'm not saying that this is you. If you're watching this and you're very conscious about your vegetarian diet, great, good for you. Still, I wouldn't recommend it, and I'll explain more about it in a moment. But really, what it comes down to is the fact that most vegetarians aren't the healthiest. Full stop. Most vegetarians eat a lot of pasta, a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of processed foods, huge amounts of processed foods. If you're a vegetarian and you're eating meat-like things that have been processed to be a certain something that it's not, we have to ask questions. The processing itself is a problem. So we need to be able to really look at what it is that we're eating and see it like we would be able to recognize it on the field. Okay. Also, there's another issue, and I'll just open a very side note bracket here in terms of vegetarianism and veganism, is that ultimately what ends up happening, and this is very much documented in the research, egg quality and sperm quality require, all of our amino acids, essential and non-essential, for optimum development. And what often happens is that vegetarians lack many of the essentials and even non-essential amino acids that you would get from your animal proteins, thus decreasing the quality of the egg, the quality of the sperm, and the quality of the embryo that's being developed. Now, if you are experiencing infertility and or miscarriage, this is an area that you do need to address. Sometimes, the reason that people become vegetarians is for many different reasons, from political to, convictions to morals to whatever, and that's perfectly okay. The reason that I became a vegetarian is because I was living in Germany at the time. The meat was coming from Chernobyl, and there was actually a recall because they were fearing that it was contaminated. I thought maybe not a good idea to continue eating the meat in this place, and therefore I became a vegetarian. 1 year rolled into another, ended up being 12 years. There was a whole lot of other kind of emotional things that came afterwards, and for me, that was something that I needed to untangle. But what ended up happening more than anything else is that I became quite an unhealthy vegetarian, eating lots of carbohydrates, lots of, just processed foods, and realized at one point that my body just wasn't responding and doing very well on that kind of diet, and that I needed to make a change. So that's essentially how all of this unfolded for me. Now, in our clinic, when we have vegetarians or vegans who absolutely refuse to go back to eating animal products, that's perfectly okay. But every single case of vegetarians that we get, we actually ensure that we test all of their organic acids and all of their amino acids, and then that we supplement with a customized blend for those missing amino acids. That is crucial, and that is going to be key. So whether you begin or decide that you want to eat meat or not, that's perfectly, completely up to you. Make sure that if you are a vegetarian, that you are a healthy one, and that you are implementing these recommendations that I'm talking about. But you do need to get tested, and you do need to get supplemented properly. It's not going to be just getting some, protein supplement off the shelf that's going to do the trick. Often people are infertile because of severe nutritional deficiencies, and this is something that is very important to address. So, that I hope we're going to close the bracket on the vegetarian thing. I have no, particular emotions around this, whether people would decide that they want to be vegetarian or not. It's certainly much easier for us to treat and do what it is that we need to do when people are not vegetarians. But if they choose that that's what they want for their lives, then I'm not going to be the one that's going to tell them otherwise, other than to say that we need to look at what it is that we're likely to find here and address it accordingly. Okay, so those are the things that we need to make sure that we are aware of. So in terms of what to add, it's everything that is going to be as natural as possible. Now, that's in the terms of food. Then we have in terms of liquids. So what are we adding here? We're adding lots and lots and lots of plain filtered water. And when I say plain, you can naturally flavor your water, right? And we want to make sure that we're looking at either, you can have carbonated water, but you must ensure that if you are having sparkling water or carbonated water, that you're absolutely having it from a glass container. So I actually have a Soda Stream because I love my sparkling water, but it's glass. Right, so you can actually buy Soda Streams with glass bottles now, and that is essentially the only thing that I would recommend, because what's interesting is that in plastic, we're not just looking at BPA. There's a lot of conversation around BPA free this, BPA free that. There's BPA, there's BPE, B, C, D, E, F, G, you name it. There's lots of different types of BPs, right, and which are found in plastics, which essentially have the same endocrine disruption as BPA. It's just that we know about BPA and there's a lot of marketing around BPA free, but ultimately phthalates, which is what you find in plastics, is a huge endocrine disruptor that's going to negatively impact females and males. So in terms of diet, unfortunately, everything we buy these days is somehow covered in plastic or comes in plastic, or as much as we can avoid that, the better. In terms of bottles, water bottles, you want to make sure that your water bottles are glass or stainless steel. You want to make sure that you really are avoiding plastic like it is the devil, because it is for your reproductive function. And so really, in terms of water, and also this is why I say filtered water, you want to be drinking about 2 to 3 liters of filtered water. And if you're in the US, please apologize in advance. You need to do the conversions yourself. I'm terrible with conversions. We're in a metric system, and that's where I kind of find myself. Copper is not okay. So there's a question here about whether copper is okay. Copper is definitely not okay. Copper competes with zinc. Zinc is an essential nutrient in terms of optimum fertility. So definitely not okay. So you want to make sure that stainless steel or glass is the only receptacles that you put your filtered water. And ideally, when you're storing food, you want to be using Pyrex containers. The ones with the plastic lid are fine as long as the plastic is not touching the food. It's going to be the best that you can get. Also, when those containers are actually at room temperature or in the fridge, the outgassing of plastic becomes less problematic. But you want to avoid your plastic Tupperware type containers, cling wrap, all of those things. And I know that those are not exactly food, but they are places where toxins will enter your body very readily, because they are present, in pretty much almost every household, and we want to make sure that we're avoiding them as much as possible, replacing them, with cling wraps. There are those beeswax covers these days that you can actually utilize. So those are the types of things that I would be recommending looking into and figuring out some alternatives for them. But in terms of water, plain water and naturally flavored water. So how do you naturally flavor your water? It's very simple. You can get anything from cinnamon sticks to herbs and spices, and placing it in your water, and or lemon, lime, even berries can be a great way to flavor your water naturally. So as long as it's naturally flavored by something that you can recognize from field to plate, go for it, okay? It's not going to be a problem if you're doing it that way. However, anything that is artificial, anything that is commercially available, I would not recommend. There is one thing which I absolutely love. In fact, let me just see if they still sell it. Flower medicines are one of my definitely, and they're not bar flowers or anything like that, or medicine flower, I think it is. But basically what these are edible essential oils. And they are wonderful. Yeah, medicineflower.com. So medicine flower is amazing because they are extracts, like the essential oil extract versions of natural foods, and they are ultra potent. So in a 2-litre jug of water, you would put 2 drops of any of the flavors. They are like the edible essential oil of whatever it is. And you then just have that as your water, in your water as a flavoring if you don't like the taste or the flavor of water. However, water should have no taste. Right? Water should literally have no color, no taste. If your water has a taste, it's because you're actually not filtering it effectively enough. And I talk about this in great detail in the Fertility Challenge, so I won't take too much time here. However, I will say you must always drink from a water filter. And those jugs are no good, okay? You need something that actually attaches to your sink. You need to be using filtered water for your cooking and washing your vegetables and your fruits and everything else, because it is in the water that there are literally so many drugs that are found as residues in water. In fact, I found a study the other day saying that of what we know, it's about 700 different types of components found in unfiltered water that people drink every single day. You name it, everything from the oral contraceptive pill to Prozac, you'd be drinking in your water if you're not actually filtering it. And that is without even taking into consideration the byproducts of industry, right? Heavy metals, toxins, and everything else. I don't even care about the bugs. Like, sure, if you filter the water, what's going to happen is you might kill some bugs, but you're going to concentrate all those other toxins. So it's not even okay to just filter your water, beg your pardon, to just boil your water. You actually need a proper water filter. 0.5 microns in filtration is the maximum largest number that you want to have in your water filter. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to a water filter shop and get educated, right? But it's essential that you are definitely filtering your water and that you have that water filter be as fine as possible, okay? So that's going to be really crucial, and it's going to make a huge difference. And then, of course, in terms of fruit, there's often a lot of questions and commentary around fruit because fruit's healthy and it should be blah, 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 you should be eating more of it, all of it. No more than 2 pieces of fruit a day. That's what you want to be adding. You want to be having fruit, yes, but you want to be really making sure that you are not having too much fruit, because that's too much sugar and the body is going to be negatively impacted hormonally as a result of that extra sugar, okay, or carbohydrate. So definitely make sure that you're having about the size of a normal apple, right? That's about a piece of fruit. So if you've got chopped up fruit, you want to kind of have around about that volume. You want to make sure that, if you're having berries, about a cup gives you, that volume. About the kind of size of a medium apple is 1 piece of fruit. Okay, so you want to have no more than about 2 of those a day. When I first met my husband, he used to, in a sitting, have like 8 pieces of fruit. I'm like, dude, no. That's not going to work, for your health in the long term. I mean, these days, my dad had cancer last year and has been treated and went to see a wonderful integrative oncologist who literally, when I was in this consultation with him, he said, look, you really need to avoid your carbohydrates and your sugars as much as possible, even from fruit, because those sugars, they feed the cancer. And I was like, whoa, it's real, right? And this coming from an oncologist. So the reality of it is that you want to make sure, because it will impact reproductive hormones as well. It will impact your metabolic hormones, which then impact your reproductive hormones. So we want to make sure that we are balancing that carbohydrate and sugar intake as much as possible and keeping things at a reasonable level, okay? So I hope that helps. And that really kind of brings us to the things to be adding. So do we have an understanding thus far? I hope that makes sense. That's the big idea, number 1. Adding the things that are going to make a difference. And of course, those are the things that you want to be focusing and basing your nutrition and your diet mostly upon. Okay, so I hope that helps. Now we're going to go on to the opposite of that, because I mean, hey, there would have to be some things that we would need to look out for. And even though I kind of almost started a little bit with the pieces of fruit in the second, I was kind of cheating a little bit. I do apologize. But it's for your own good, right? It's for your own good. But the second thing, and this is something that's going to be really important, is looking at the things that we need to be aware about. And that's all of our packaged and processed and foods that really aren't foods. Those things, those products, right? Anything that comes from a packet that has writing on it trying to convince. Have you ever noticed that Brussels sprouts sitting on, you know, those kind of open things in the supermarket that you actually need to put into a bag? There's no kind of marketing to tell you how good that food is for you or trying to convince you that that is healthy and that you need to take that home. Have you ever noticed that? Like, healthy food, 1 to 3 steps from field to table to plate, don't require any marketing to tell you how healthy they are. And that is really how we want to keep our nutrition, right? How we want to keep our diets. The second that you have something with a colorful packet that is trying to convince you that this is healthy and this is good for you and that you should take it home, you really have to question it. You really have to really deeply question it. And that's why I don't even talk about, you know, the need to read labels. Yes, damn right you need to read labels, but really, no, you don't, because you shouldn't be eating foods that have labels, ideally, right? So for the most part, other than, of course, in my third big idea, which I'll share with you, and then I'll let you know how to best make sure that you make those decisions. But ultimately, on a day-to-day, for, you know, the 21 major meals in your week, so if we were to have 3 meals, you know, in a day, the 21 meals in your week, you want to be making sure that you're basing your meals on vegetables and protein as much as possible for at least 19 of them, right? And that really is what's going to make a huge difference in having you optimize your health and your fertility in the long term. And of course, your health after a baby is born. And that's also important, because I'm sure that you want to be around, right, for as long as possible. You want to be as healthy as possible for as long as possible and have the best possible quality of life whilst raising your children. So this is going to be important now, from beginning to baby and beyond. Okay. Now, in terms of the things that we need to be avoiding, the things that we need to be kind of letting go of, gluten and dairy-free for me is a must. And again, remember how in the very beginning of this talk, I was talking about the fact that, yes, we can go to the science and we can say that in healthy individuals, it's absolutely okay. We also have the opposite of that, which tells us that, for example, gluten for people who are undiagnosed or have been diagnosed with celiac disease, for example, will cause infertility. So in between those two places, there is a huge grey area, okay? And the grey area that exists basically is really unsure about whether we should be eating those foods or not. The reality is that in my experience over the last 20 years, having treated thousands of patients, there hasn't been one time, and I absolutely know this for a fact, there has been not once where I have recommended a patient to go gluten and dairy-free that they had a negative reaction to it. Other than, of course, the emotional negative reaction to it, right, which can sometimes happen. And we've talked about how to deal with that in the beginning of this talk, so just go ahead and do that if you need to. But really, we're talking about physiological components here that will make a difference to your ability to not only conceive, but take home a healthy baby. So what I have seen, however, is the opposite of that. They go gluten-free and dairy-free for quite a period of time. Then, of course, you know, at some point after they have their baby and everything else, they go back onto eating gluten and dairy and start to notice all sorts of symptoms that they weren't experiencing whilst off gluten and dairy. So the reality of it is that for my patients in the clinic, you can choose to do whatever it is that you want. You can even choose to entertain the possibility that my evidence in terms of the clinical experience that I have in treating patients could be something that you would like to try, in which case I can congratulate you and commend you. But for my patients in the clinic, this is absolutely a recommendation, is go completely gluten and dairy free, because it will make a difference to metabolic hormones, which eventually will make a difference to reproductive hormones, and of course to the immune system. And the immune system is incredibly crucial in ensuring that the body is doing what it is that it needs to do when we're talking about keeping a healthy pregnancy to term. If already the immune system is overreacting, if we have natural killer cells, if we have autoimmune disease, if we have thyroid autoimmunity, all of those factors will be further impacted by eating foods that are going to further sensitize the immune system. So the reason, or one of the big reasons that I recommend my patients who have tried lots of different things and nothing has worked to go gluten and dairy free is because of that sensitization of the immune system, as well as, of course, taking away some of these chemicals that will impact hormones in the long term. This has been one of the crucial steps that I see in my clinic that makes a huge difference to couples in this situation. So my recommendation here is that for this reason. In fact, we've created an infographic. In fact, if you go to naturalfertilitybreakthrough.com and then you go and you search the blog for infographics, you will find this particular infographic, and you will find the preamble of that infographic with some interesting conversations that I've had over the years with the media in terms of this. And the reality of it is that most people have no idea, right, of how much this actually will impact someone who is having difficulty conceiving or keeping a healthy pregnancy to term in being able to do so. And, you now know, so make sure that you implement what you know. So gluten and dairy free is definitely something that we need to consider over and above, of course, these processed and chemical foods. I've got one mentor who basically says, that a lot of these processed foods are science fair experiments. They're not actually food, they're products that are designed for palatability to get us to eat it and be hooked on them so that there is a huge amount of profit in terms of big food, right? So you just need to be aware of that, because it is a little bit of a free for all in terms of what's actually allowed on the shelves of supermarkets. And I particularly don't recommend those types of things for your optimum fertility. Then, of course, there's trans fats. Now, there are lots and lots, and I mean lots of studies that have been done on the impact of trans fats. Trans fats are slightly denatured fats that are found in processed foods. So things like fried foods and biscuits, pastries, cakes, anything that is actually commercially manufactured is going to have trans fats, because trans fats increase palatability and shelf life of products. Now, the problem with trans fats, there was a great, one of the really good Harvard studies that was done on this, showing that for every 2% increase of trans fat consumption, there is a decrease by 73% on a woman's ability to ovulate. There's been other studies as well looking at the impact of trans fats on sperm quality, and we see it across the board, a decrease in sperm quality, motility, morphology count, all of it is impacted by a consumption of trans fats. And 2% increase in consumption of trans fats is like a tiny little packet of chips, right? And whatever it is that you actually want to equate that to, it's something that comes from a packet that we really need to be looking at avoiding as much as we absolutely and possibly can, because it will dramatically decrease the chances of taking home a healthy baby, and of course affecting a conception to begin with. So trans fats are definitely the types of things that you want to be avoiding altogether. And I've got a couple of questions here in terms of sugars. I'm coming to sugars, so just bear with me. And definitely no milk, yogurt or cheese is what I would recommend. So that is essentially what you need to know in terms of gluten and dairy free. And gluten, by the way, is found in things like, rye, triticale, barley. So go online. If you just put gluten-containing grains, you'll be able to find it. Wheat, of course, spelt, all of those grains contain gluten. So you want to make sure that you are avoiding them as much as possible. But also remember always, please remember always, 1 to 3 steps from field to table. That will literally get you into the place where you need to be in terms of your nutrition, okay? Sugar. I've actually published in my Eat Your Way to Parenthood book 132 reasons as to why you should avoid sugar, because it is highly toxic. It's 50 times apparently more addictive than cocaine, believe it or not. And it gets people hooked very, very easily. And, you know, it actually does decrease your nutrient status in being able to process your foods effectively and, of course, absorb the right types of nutrients. You need to use and utilize your own nutrients to be able to actually digest processed sugars. So it's something that you really do want to avoid. It's not going to be in your best interest to have it, whether it's from cane sugar to anything else. You want to be avoiding it pretty much, because sugar is sugar. It's that kind of carbohydrate that will feed not only cancer, as I've been told by my dad's oncologist, but also it will imbalance your metabolic hormones primarily. And then, of course, you know, it will imbalance your reproductive hormones as well, because they're all in a similar kind of feedback loop. So sugar is something that really we really want to be leaving for the 10% for the soul, and that's coming up. So just bear with me there for a moment. The last thing that I want to say in terms of packaged and processed is beverages. In the same way that in the first big idea, I've said that what you want to add is water, plain or naturally flavored. That's pretty much the only thing you want to be drinking, okay? It is the number one way that you're going to be at your absolute healthiest. So if you want to drink herbal teas, that's fine, but we want to be eliminating or avoiding caffeine. And so in the infographics that I was talking about as well, there is an entire infographic, completely research-based, that you're going to be able to actually understand the impact of caffeine on reproductive function, the ability to take a healthy pregnancy to term as well, and of course of having a healthy baby. The half-life of caffeine in a newborn is like something like 9 days. So a mother drinking a cup of coffee today will still be impacting that newborn child 9 days from that one cup of coffee 9 days later, right? So you need to be really aware of the fact that the things that we do in terms of food, we might consume something today, but it will continue to impact us for days. And if you're eating it on a daily basis, it will have a very long-term effect in how the body actually operates and how things actually are addressed in the best way that it can be in terms of optimizing the chances of taking home a healthy baby. So we really need to be aware of that, because this is going to be a crucial piece in making sure that, that you are at the best possible place that you need to be. My mummy is watching my Facebook Live. Hi, mummy. I love you. My mum has become an Instagram fanatic. I will just, you know, she will be so embarrassed right now. But yeah, she is the woman who has made it all possible. She's made me, and she certainly has done a very big, great job. I love you, mummy. So anyway, so now that she's going to be highly embarrassed, let's continue on our little path to understanding what else you need to do. Yeah, so beverages, and making sure as well that you are avoiding things that come in plastic containers, in Tetra Paks. Tetra Paks are those kind of cardboard containers. Inside, there's all sorts of plastic, phthalates, BPAs, you know, you name it. So you want to make sure that whatever it is that you're drinking comes from a glass or stainless steel bottle, and of course that it is in a way that is not going to be full of sugar. And oh, my mummy said hello and I love you. Oh, yeah, so it's not going to be full of sugar and all these things that, you know, we really should be avoiding. So making sure that we've got that in place is going to be crucial, okay? Absolutely critical. So in terms of drinks, I think that pretty much covers all the things that you need to know there. Any questions? This is a good place for questions. Making sure that we can go through and answer questions. I know that we are almost on time. Instagram is telling me 2 minutes and I have one third idea. The third idea is And if you are on Instagram and you want to finish watching this talk, definitely jump on the Gabriela Rosa Facebook page, because that's where you're going to be able to see the end of this. Unfortunately, Instagram only gives me 60 minutes and I talk too much, as I'm constantly told. And so what ends up happening is that I often run out of time on Instagram before we are actually finished. So third big idea, 10% for the soul. What does it mean? What is 10% for the soul? Remember how I was talking about before, in a kind of week, we've got 21 meals, right? What we want to be doing is making sure that we inbuild a little bit of flexibility into this whole picture, okay? And the way in which you do that is that you have a couple of planned meals that you have whatever it is that you want. There is a little bit of a proviso here. And this is going to be important for you to understand and recognize, because the proviso is this. For some people, 2 meals becomes 2 days, which then becomes 2 weeks, which then becomes 2 years, right? And we want to make sure that we do not have that situation happen, because that's not going to be in your best interest. Therefore, 2 meals is 2 meals. And what you can have in those 2 meals is whatever you want, as long as you are not gluten intolerant and or sensitive to dairy. Okay, so you could have that in your 2% for the soul, in your 10% for the soul, sorry. You could have those types of meals, but you must not be diagnosed with any kind of gut condition like Crohn's disease or celiac disease or, diverticulitis or you name it, because all of those conditions are going to be exacerbated by gluten and dairy anyway. So if you are not, if you're ordinarily quite healthy, you can have those foods. The one thing that I will absolutely recommend to my patients that they never have is fried foods. So in your 10% for the soul, you absolutely must avoid fried foods, alcohol, and caffeine. Okay, so in everything else, like for me, for example, when I was doing my preconception preparation and I was, working in the same way that I teach my patients to do so, I made sure absolutely that I had a pizza every week. That was my sanity, right? That for me was the thing that I absolutely loved and adored and wanted to have, and therefore didn't want to miss out on. And so my weekly pizza, and actually to this day, I have a weekly pizza. I love pizza. Luckily for me, I'm not intolerant, completely. Everybody has a certain level of sensitivity to gluten and dairy, so don't take this the wrong way. If I eat it many days in a row, I'll start feeling it in my digestive tract. But, to have it once a week because of that threshold kind of situation, it's perfectly fine and it works. So just be aware of those factors, because sometimes you'll be able to have it, sometimes you just won't. So listen to your body, listen to what your body's trying to tell you, and act accordingly. But this is a good guideline to know, like for chocolate as well, like chocolate and pizza, my God, seriously, get out of my way. Those are the 2 things that I will do almost anything for, and therefore they are a part of my 2 kind of meals for the week, right? Where I will have those foods and not really concern myself with, anything else, and have always done so. So think about what it is for you. As long as it's not fried foods, alcohol, and caffeine, it's in for your 10% for the soul, okay? But I think that it's important to have a 10% for the soul, because it takes the anxiety and the stress of, oh my God, I'm never going to have the foods that I love again, out of the equation, and it makes it manageable. So that's something that I would definitely recommend that you do implement. Yes, I've recommended in terms of alcohol. Look, alcohol is a poison. Okay, there is no safe limit of alcohol intake for optimum health and optimum fertility. As much as, people who drink wine love to fund research that says that the French paradox is a real thing, i.e., that red wine's good for you. No, it's not actually. What there is data on is the effect of the grape skin and the grape seed as an antioxidant, but you have to concentrate that thousands of times to actually get an antioxidant effect. So really, this whole BS about alcohol being good for you is actually just marketing. And here's the problem with that too, is that alcohol is a known teratogen. It will basically deform a developing embryo. So often, a person might even conceive but not even understand or see that they're pregnant because that embryo has demised way before a pregnancy test was even in place. These people who say, oh, you know, I got drunk and I got pregnant, well, that is very damn lucky, let me tell you, because often the opposite is true. And so, and of course, you know, we all know the impact of fetal alcohol syndrome. We know mothers who continue to drink throughout pregnancy and the effect that has on the embryo and the development of that baby. So it's irresponsible, to say the least, you know, to condone alcohol and alcohol intake for couples who are trying to conceive and or take a healthy pregnancy to term and create a healthy baby. And this applies to both prospective parents because, by the way, there is an infographic on alcohol on the website as well, so make sure that you have a look at that. But the negative impact on sperm is just as real. So if we're wanting to improve and optimize and address this issue that you are dealing with, you really do need to consider, what do you want more? It's a big question, right? You want a drink of alcohol or you want a baby? Like, sometimes that's what it comes down to. And, you know, I know that people absolutely hate it when I say it, but it's true. There is a very fine line between blame and responsibility, and taking full responsibility for the things that you can actually do to optimize your chances to take home a healthy baby is really what this is all about. So you do need to consider what it is that, you know, you're wanting there. So I hope that makes sense, because alcohol is definitely not going to, you know, like if I was to say to you, okay, here's a little bit of rat poison, drink that. It's just a little bit, you know, it's flavored nicely. Drink it and, you know, enjoy it. Would you do that? I think most people would decline the wonderful invitation. And that is exactly the same thing with alcohol. I mean, alcohol basically gets blended with all sorts of things because the taste of it and its palatability isn't really that great. Of course, it makes people, you know, kind of forget for momentarily what it is that they're worried about in their lives, for some people anyway, and that's why it's such a big thing. But really, it's not because it's good for you, and it's certainly not because it reduces stress. It causes more, you know, internal stress within the system from an oxidative perspective than anything else. So you do need to consider, if you're using alcohol for stress reduction, that perhaps you need some new strategies. So those are the things to be looking out for there. And of course, you know, can you take almond and coconut milk? Yes, you can, as long as you make it yourself and they don't come in a Tetra Pak. Okay, so I hope that answers all of the questions that we had today. I mean, very brief announcements. As I mentioned before, the Fertility Challenge is currently on. If you want to join me, put it into your URL, fertilitychallenge.online/register. fertilitychallenge.online/register. The next talk that I'm going to do on Ask Gabriela Rosa Live is about low AMH and what it means. Is it a game changer or not? So do join me for that one if you've got low ovarian reserve, diminished ovarian reserve, poor egg quality, or have simply been told that your AMH is low and that you're most likely never going to have a baby. This is definitely going to be the talk for you, okay? So same place, same time. And of course, if you want direct and specific guidance from myself and my team, you are more than welcome to contact the team for a complimentary conversation about your particular situation. We do free fertility assessments to figure out if we can be of assistance in your case. The way to book an assessment is actually just going to thefertile.me/chat. thefertile.me/chat. So, this brings us to the end of Eating Your Way to Parenthood and this talk. And I really do hope that you will use the information, the guidelines that I've given you here, to create something that's going to work for you, but that above all is going to help you optimize your health and optimize your fertility. And you know what it is that you need to do in order to transform your life. Now it's a matter of getting all of that, rolling up your sleeves and doing it. So I look forward to connecting with you again, and until next time, bye for now.